Everybody wants to fire coaches when things don't go their way, but boy, you got to be careful what you wish for because it could get worse. We'll talk about that more here on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
That is a fact. It is your team every day here on Locked On NFL. We thank you for making us your first listen. And wherever you listen or watch podcasts, please make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode of Locked On NFL. It is Crossover Thursday around the Locked On NFL Network, and that means that it is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app and use the code Locked On NFL to win $50 instantly when you play just $5. Shout out to everyone who joins us, all of our everydayers here on Locked On NFL. And if you're here for the first time, thank you very much. Where we use the help of local experts to get us through all of the news cycle that's going on in the National Football League. And of course, today's Thursday. That means Chris Carter. Carter Critiques, Locked On Steelers is our local expert. And here's what we'll be talking about. Is there an upset alert? And maybe one of the teams Chris has seen close up are the teams that we're going to be discussing, or is the team that we're going to be discussing. Tyreek on the move. Could he be going to a destination that maybe Chris Carter's very, very familiar with? We'll see about that. The Bears, Saints, and Cowboys face hiring challenges, ones that they created by themselves. Speaking of hiring challenges, the Steelers don't have one, but everyone seems to think that they should. And I say, be careful what you wish for when you start trying to get rid of people that are consistent, like Mike Tomlin. And that's where we're going to start because other teams are going through this stuff. Chris, I said a couple of weeks ago that the Bears were interviewing everybody. Turns out that wasn't true because they found some more people to interview. Now it appears they're really interviewing everybody. It kind of comes across as a little bit disjointed, man, when you think about it. Or is it a matter of them just doing the due diligence?
I mean, I think that the Bears are trying to leave no stone unturned. So, I mean, I can't look into the hiring practices that they got, but I know that the Bears they've been behind the times for so long. They need to get this right. Like they got Caleb Williams, you got the quarterback that you think is going to be your franchise guy. They can't afford to keep missing on this, and they miss on this. They miss on this next head coach. That means they're going to be probably right back where they are in 3 more years after Caleb Williams' contract runs out because they didn't develop him the right way. So I get that they might be maybe taking some extra precautions, but they need to do something along those lines, Tony. Like they need to actually have it work. They need to deliver when it comes to hiring a coach. So if that takes more interviews, that takes more interviews. But I think it's more of a symptom of the problem right now for the Bears than anything else.
It is. I'm going to play you something from the Peacock and Williams show. They're going to mention some names. I'm going to show you how long this list of names is, and then I'm going to tell you right now, it's only a fraction of the names that have been mentioned. Listen to Peacock and Williams and talk about it.
Let's go alphabetical here and start with the Chicago Bears, who have a vacant head coach job. And I think the Bears have interviewed by far and maybe twice as many, or at least put in twice as many requests as every other team in the NFL. So Ryan Poles trying to be thorough there in Chicago, including they had some interest, and I think we're trying to interview Bill Belichick before he took the North Carolina job. So to start with, interim head coach Thomas Brown has completed an interview. Matt Campbell, Iowa State head coach. Pete Carroll, former Seahawks head coach, has completed an interview. Interesting name there. So they've gone
2 old guys, even though they didn't get to interview Belichick. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Wow.
Ron Rivera, they've completed an interview there. Another older coach that's been around. So maybe some stability is what they're looking for here. Some younger coaches as well are on the list. Brian Flores.
He was on the 85 Bears. He was on the Ditka team.
Yes, vintage Bears.
yeah.
Bring him home. Here's another interesting one. David Shaw, former Stanford head coach. He's a current executive right now with the Denver Broncos since he left Stanford, and they have completed that interview as well. They've done interviews already with Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator of the Lions, Aaron Glenn, defensive coordinator of the Lions. They have completed an interview with Cardinals offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, which is an interesting name. I think he might be a hot coach. I don't know if it's this
He seems like a year away, but boy, he's done good stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Another one in that vein is Anthony Weaver, who's the defense coordinator for the Miami Dolphins right now.
Look, if you want to hear the rest of that list, go listen to the entire episode of Peacock and Williamson, because that was about a third of the way of the guys they're interviewing. And it's not really to pick at the Bears. What it is to say for me is, when I put all of those names in a bag, right? Like we cooking chicken, and I'm gonna shake it up, Chris. And the thing that I hope to pull out is a guy like Mike Tomlin. It sounds like they want something sure, something very, very consistent, a leader of men. They want something that many people, I don't know if it's all Steeler fans or if it's all media, but all I keep hearing is, I swear when Pittsburgh lost to Baltimore, all I heard was, this is it for Tomlin. This is it. You better be careful what you wish for getting rid of. And the Pittsburgh I don't think they're going to do it. Obviously, you're the expert and you're going to tell us. You got to be careful what you wish for when you run consistency out that door.
I think that's the thing, is that, one, the Steelers aren't going to do it. The Rooneys have already basically said, let the appropriate people know that Mike Tomlin's the future right now. And there's a no trade clause. So if you think that he's getting traded, that ain't happening. Mike Tomlin says straight up, to stop wasting your time if you call in to try to trade for him and try to get, sway in the interests. I think the frustration comes from the Steelers fans that haven't seen a playoff win in the last 8 seasons. It's been 5 straight playoff losses for the Steelers. But I think that there's also the people who have, who keep the cool heads, who keep their eyes above the trees, and they're able to see, like, look, Mike Tomlin is getting some teams to the playoffs that shouldn't be in the playoffs.
Come on.
Like if it was just pure rosters, I've said, like, hey, like, I thought this team could win 10, 11 games this year, be a wild card team, maybe win a playoff game. But like, the reason I said that was because I know that Mike Tomlin is going to upgrade the things that's on this team. And he did that for most of the season. They were put in a really good situation week after week. They were able to win 10 games very early. They went on a 5-game losing streak to end the season, and that was unfortunate. But it's the same thing with last year. I think there's very few coaches in the NFL that would have made it to the playoffs with Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, and Mason Rudolph with the situation that the Steelers were in last year. And then the year before that, when they started 2-6 and they finished 9-8, with TJ Watt missing the first half of the season and Kenny Pickett being in his rookie season. And then, old man Ben Roethlisberger, they have found time and time again to dig it out and find ways to get into the playoffs 4 out of the last 5 years, 8 out of the last 11 years. And the only times they've missed the playoffs are when Ben Roethlisberger completely tore his elbow and they had a 4th-string undrafted rookie quarterback in 2019. 2018 when Le'Veon Bell didn't show up and the defense wasn't that good just yet. And 2021, when it was Kenny Pickett's rookie year, they started the season 2-6 because TJ Watt missed half the season. So, like, those are the 3 years they haven't made the playoffs. Now, for Steelers fans, they go, we want Super Bowls. We want championships. And I think it's funny, because I look around and I'm like, man, like, I cover this other team in Pittsburgh called Pitt Basketball, and they had a guy named Jamie Dixon who was accused of doing the same thing. He couldn't get past the Elite Eight. He couldn't get past the Sweet 16, and he developed a really great, Pitt program that was competitive every year. They say, we need to move on. So they went and hired a guy named Kevin Stallings, and he completely trashed the program. And Jeff Capel has had to lift it up from not winning a conference game in 2 years to be able to get it to where the point where they're a bubble team again. So I think there's still some people that are like, you shouldn't be afraid to go out and try to get people. But like, at the same time, I think that there's a reason, because a lot of people recognize, like, you saw like Rex Ryan after the Steelers lost, and Rex Ryan hates the Steelers. He talks bad about them all the time because they beat his butt so many times while he was coaching the Ravens or the Jets. But he was like, listen, as much as I'm like enjoying the Steelers losing, like, you can't be mad at Mike Tomlin for getting this team to the playoffs. So he gets demoted because he overachieved with a team that shouldn't have been there and then lost eventually in the playoffs with them. I said all along, the Ravens were going to win this division. They're my Super Bowl favorite in the AFC because I think this is their year. And I thought the best path for the Steelers to win a playoff game this year was going to be to get the 5 seed and hope that you draw the Texans or a team that's not playing well, and you get to play them. You didn't draw the 5 seed, you draw the 6 seed to go on the road to Baltimore. And yes, it's disappointing that you can't beat your division rival and that you couldn't pull that out. But again, Lamar Jackson's an MVP quarterback
Yeah, man.
with 9 Pro Bowlers on a roster. That is going to be tough to pull off every single time. And I think that this is what the Steelers are looking at right now is they have to rebuild several things. Now, are there things that are falling short? Absolutely. Mike Tomlin needs to do better with his offense. He needs to that the defensive game plan was not a smart one for how they would handle the read option against the Ravens. There's little things like that here and there that you could poke at. But ultimately, when you look at it, it's also a ton of little things that stack up to getting them there in the first place, especially with they don't have a dominant offensive line yet. They don't have an MVP quarterback, leading them. Their defense, I think it still has a ton of playmakers on it. But there's a lot of those guys that make it the most expensive defense in the NFL that were kind of there because they were needed to get paid just to have veterans on the roster like Larry Ogunjobi and Preston Smith, who they traded for in the middle of the season. I look at the Steelers right now and think they have so much fixing to do, and Mike Tomlin has literally fixed every position group at some point on that roster to be better for a future season, whether it was the offensive line from when he inherited a bad offensive line and made a great offensive line in 2010s, whether it's a secondary that he's retooled several times throughout his career, whether it's the pass rush that he's retooled multiple times throughout his career, the linebackers, the running back room, the wide receiver room. They've gone through so many star wide receivers under Mike Tomlin. I think that's what the Steelers are looking at now. I think the big push here, Tony, is that some people are going to say, well, you know what? I don't care. Give me the bad years, because I think the Steelers just need to draft super duper high. They need to have those really high picks. That's how they're going to get a franchise quarterback, and then they can find their Joe Burrow, their Lamar Jackson. But, to Mike Tomlin's point, he's like, you know what? Lamar Jackson was picked at the bottom of the first round.
Come on.
Picked in the second round. The Patrick Mahomes, the Chiefs were 12-4. The 2 seed, in fact, bounced from the playoffs by the Steelers the year that they went and got him. That does not guarantee. You don't need to have a terrible year to go get a franchise quarterback. You also don't always fix things if you just tank, cut ties with the head coach to make you competitive, and then you tank, and then you try to dig your way out. Look at the New York Giants. They had Tom Coughlin for years, and I think Tom Coughlin's even in a different situation because he had multiple losing seasons, and I think that's a different spot than what Mike Tomlin has allowed the Steelers to be in. But they have not recovered since they fired Tom Coughlin. A lot of Pittsburgh fans will say, "Look at Andy Reid with the Eagles.
Yep.
They let him go. They won a Super Bowl. Yeah, but they won a Super Bowl 3 coaches later. And if you're going to tell me that you think that it's better for the Eagles that they let go of Andy Reid, who's now won 3 Super Bowls somewhere else, might win 4 this year, and in one of those Super Bowls beat the Philadelphia Eagles, I think you're crazy." So I look at Mike Tomlin, and I think, like, man, there's gonna be a lot of complaints. There's gonna be a lot of people that are whining and moaning, but the people that are in the know that, hey, he is pulling the roster as it is to its best, to its ceiling, and the Steelers need the person who's doing that as they pull their way through and rebuild several parts of this roster.
This sounds like somebody in the NBA that would complain that they had a West Coast team, and they complained during the years where there's a 16-year period where Phil Jackson won 5 and Greg Popovich won 5. It's like complaining because Pittsburgh is in the conference where New England was and now where Kansas City is, not to mention Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and oh, by the way, Peyton Manning. Over the last 2 decades, that's what they have had to go against. And Bill and Roethlisberger got old, just like Manning did. So my point is they're not looking at degree of difficulty. And you mentioned Tom Coughlin. The Jaguars fired Tom Coughlin, then he left and won Super Bowls, just like the Eagles. And the Jaguars have never ever recovered from losing that. I'm going to tell you just how wicked this coaching this coaching hiring process can be. And we'll go through 2 teams that I wouldn't want to be either one of them. And that's the Cowboys and the Saints. We'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you in part by FanDuel. That is correct, man. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. Now, the FanDuel app is easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. I know when Saquon Barkley slid down last week, it disappointed a lot of y'all, but don't worry about it. Don't let it come down to the last place. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Rolling along here with Chris Carter, the special expert host here on Locked On NFL. We're talking about the challenges of hiring coaches. People wanting to get rid of something because they think it's stale. Well, I tell you what, being consistently involved in it is not as stale as expecting to be involved in it every year, only to be disappointed. There's a couple of teams that have to have their issues fixed. One of them is the Saints. We'll get to them in just a second. The other is the Dallas Cowboys. And you say, well, the Dallas Cowboys over the last couple of years, they won 12 games. They have a quarterback that everyone would have given $250 million, maybe not guaranteed, in Dak Prescott. So having a quarterback is very important, but also having a team where you really understand the things that need to happen in order to be successful, that's important too. Not always looking for the big headlines like the Cowboys. Deion Sanders has come up a lot about whether he take this job in Dallas. Listen to what the guys on the Squad Show have to say about that. Landon McCool from Locked On Cowboys.
The Dallas Cowboys aren't satisfied with just getting primetime slots for no reason. They also want to get primetime spots in their coaching department. What is up with Deion Sanders to the Dallas Cowboys, Landon?
We can put this to bed right away by just going ahead and mentioning that in order for the Jerry to get Deion Sanders from Colorado, somebody's going to pay Colorado $8 million to get him out of his contract. So considering how cheap Jerry has been these last few years, I don't think Jerry was willing to pay any one coach $8 million for a total contract period. I doubt very much that he's going to pay $8 million just to have the option to negotiate with Deion Sanders on his contract. So let's go ahead and put that out. But if you want to go down that road, it just doesn't seem like a very feasible thing anyways. The things that make Deion Sanders a viable and good college football coach are not necessarily translatable to the NFL. And I think that he's not necessarily looking to get into the business of coaching grown men. I think that the thing that he likes to do is he likes being a coach that shapes young men, like his life was shaped when he was young.
I like Deion. I named my oldest son after Deion. He was my favorite athlete 31 years ago, and I wanted to have some sort of inspiration for my kid. But Deion is a guy, if he runs a team, the team is going to be coach-centric. Dallas will never be coach-centric with Jerry Jones, who gets a pass, by the way, for firing the very people that he himself handpicks to hire. Be careful what you wish for when you're talking about an owner, because you could have him instead of the Rooneys.
Yeah, I think that's the thing with the Cowboys is that, you know, a lot of people have been asking Jerry, what's the plan? What's the plan? Mike McCarthy, 3 straight 12-win seasons and then a losing season there without Dak Prescott. I look at what the Cowboys have been doing, and I think that they've been like, man, for example, when Mike Tomlin doesn't have a franchise quarterback, he finds a way to get to the playoffs. When Mike McCarthy doesn't have a franchise quarterback, he's 5 wins, 4 wins. It's about to be an ugly year. And I think that the Cowboys, they're trying to find they're in the prime of a run right now. Like they Dak Prescott, they have CeeDee Lamb, they got Micah Parsons, they've got multiple leaders on defense. They've got talent on both sides of the ball, but they need to strike now. And so Jerry Jones has to figure out what's the way to strike now if he's going to make that move. And if Mike McCarthy is in it, okay, fine. But you got to go out and get somebody big who's going to be ready to lead a team with a lot of big personalities, and whose personality is bigger than Deion Sanders, who literally calls himself Prime. So I think that there's a chance that maybe it could work out. But as Landon brings up, like that's a lot of money that Jerry Jones is going to have to cop up, and also Deion Sanders, I think he wanted to get to the NFL. I don't know if this is the situation he wanted to get there with. I think that there's always the question: does he want to just coach his son, and will he get the Cowboys to take Shedeur Sanders and move on from Dak Prescott? There's a lot of things that go into that there, but I think the Cowboys they're in an interesting position because they have the stars for right now and for the immediate future already under contract. They have to find someone who's going to best blend the rest of the roster around them and make it so that they're not such a top-heavy roster that when one of those guys goes down, everything just doesn't work.
All right, part 3 of Be Careful What You Wish For. I don't know if the Saints pressured Sean Payton. In fact, I think Payton just wanted to take a year off, right? But there were those Saints fans that were kind of thinking it's time for us to go do something else. How'd that work out for you? And look at what Sean Payton's doing now. It's the job I don't think anybody wants. Listen to Ross Jackson talk about the candidates.
Well, one of the New Orleans Saints' top head coaching candidates, or at least we expected him to be one of the New Orleans Saints' top head coaching candidates, is officially off the market. I'm Ross Jackson, host of Locked On at Saints podcast. Mike Vrabel, the former Tennessee Titans head coach, former New England Patriots linebacker, now rejoining the New England Patriots as their next head coach after they kind of surprised everybody and moved on from head coach Gerard Mayo after just 1 year. Vrabel is somebody that the New Orleans Saints were connected to a lot going into their head coaching search, along with, of course, defensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, Aaron Glenn. And so he was considered probably one of the top guys that could potentially end up with the New Orleans Saints. But it seems that with him now going to New England, of course, he's now off of the map for New Orleans. So now you're looking for New Orleans to continue their search. They've interviewed Aaron Glenn. They've talked to Anthony Weaver from Miami. They talked to Mike Kafka from the New York Giants. I don't expect much to come of that. But then they have Darren Rizzi, Joe Brady set to meet next week. I would imagine that Aaron Glenn is still up at the top of the list, but I don't think Joe Brady is too far off as well. Bills are playing right now, so Saints obviously probably watching that pretty closely. But I think that that's where you're watching this coaching search move next for New Orleans. And I won't be surprised to hear if there's any new names that could potentially be added to the list after they get through their next wave of interviews as well. So for more on the New Orleans Saints head coaching search, what it means to not have Mike Vrabel involved, and other candidates that could potentially still be added, make sure you're checking out the Locked On at Saints podcast, wherever you get your podcast.
Chris, it's the job I think I would be least interested. Dallas is a close second, but this might be the job I think I'd be least interested in because I think this is going to take 2 or 3 years just to get this thing headed back in the right direction.
No, I think here's the thing is that this is why Sean Payton left, was that this organization, the way it had tied things together, it put them in a sinkhole. And you look at their roster right now, according to overthecap.com, the Saints are over the cap at their current 2025 roster by $52.3 million. Now, normally when something like that happens, there's a lot of money that can be saved if you move on from players. For example, the Steelers are 52.3 million under the cap right now in 2025. And if the Steelers really wanted to just say, you know what, Tomlin, get out of here, we're gonna blow everything up. If they cut TJ Watt today, or if they traded him away, they'd save 21 million against the cap. If they did the same thing to Minka Fitzpatrick, 8.6, Cam Hayward 9.8, Patrick Queen 9.6, Preston Smith 13 million, they're gonna cut him, they're gonna get 13 million, 7 million from Larry Ogunjobi, 7.8 from Isaac Seumalo. They could just create a windfall of, you know what, we just want to buy a whole new team. They could go do that if they wanted to. The Saints, the highest cap savings that I find here is like 3.5 million for Alontae Taylor. But guys like Derek Carr, who's just old and just being paid a lot of money, you're only going to save $1.3 million this year. Cameron Jordan, you would lose money by trying to move on from him. Taysom Hill, you're tied to him for $17.7 million in dead cap money. The Saints are in salary cap hell, and so that is what you're looking at. If you're signing a coach there's a coach that like you're basically like signing up like, listen, I just wanted to always be a head coach in the NFL. And this is the only time I'm ever going to get, because I probably after 1 or 2 years, I'm gone anyways because we ain't going to be good. And I think the Saints, they certainly have some talent on the team. They can win some games here and there. But the way they've been built and the way they've been structured, this is why Sean Payton got out years ago, was before even they signed Derek Carr and they did all these other things. They were in a salary cap nightmare. They signed a whole bunch of his guys after he went 7-9 for 3 straight seasons with the Saints to try to think, okay, we got the nucleus. This is it. And then when it wasn't, he was like, deuces, I'm out of here. Get me
Yep.
away from this nonsense. And now he's got a whole new rookie quarterback and a younger roster and more salary cap to play with. But rest assured, this is what the Saints did to themselves with their salary cap situation. And it looks like they may have it may be quite some time before they dig themselves up out of here.
Yeah, we said this last week. This looked like leaving Steady Eddie for the dude at the restaurant with taco meat. This isn't what actually worked, Chris. We talked about that last week. This is what time.
Man, I'm telling you, whoever this taco meat guy must have messed you up way back in your lifetime.
Hey, bro, I might have been Mr. Taco Meat though. That's the thing. It's two-sided, man. All right, I'm gonna give you a gift though. I'm gonna give you a wide receiver free agency for the Steelers. I want you to tell me how it works, and then I'm gonna let you try to see if this upset alert is valid. We'll do that in the third final segment here on Locked On NFL. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Rocket Money. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? This definitely happened to me. Happened to me more than once, actually. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them all down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps you lower bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 when using all the app's premium features. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on. One more time, rocketmoney/locked-on. All right, man, we've been talking about be careful what you wish for. And now I'm going to ask Chris Carter something because Tyreek Hill isn't happy, right? I think Tyreek Hill can still play. I think Tyreek Hill needs to be around a winner. He's shown that he can do that when he was with the Chiefs. And I think guys like him, when things go a little bit south, their eccentric personalities seem to kick in and take over. I want you to hear Kyle Krabs talk about Tyreek Hill, and then I'm going to give Tyreek Hill a destination and see if Chris agrees.
It goes back to the saying, people come into your life for a reason or a season, right? And Tyreek Hill came into the Dolphins' lives for 3 seasons to be exactly, but like the metaphor is a season of like the calendar year, right? It's not for forever. And sometimes when that happens, then there's no longer a mutual need for one another. And if you told me that's the place that we've reached with Tyreek Hill, after all of the off-season headlines, after some frustrating play this year, after availability and removing yourself from a game, and then saying what was said after the game, I wouldn't take any exception with that either. And the only thing that I wish is that Mike McDaniel would have stood up for the rest of the guys in that locker room.
All right, here we go. So Tyreek Hill has kind of said, deuces, I'm out, right? And there are some people that think that George Pickens wants to get out too, and he's played his last game as a Steeler. Chris, I'm just going to throw it out there. The Steelers have the cap space. The Dolphins need a catch radius wide receiver. Would you do a swap for those two with a little bit of extra compensation, or is Pittsburgh done and through with all of these me guys?
I think that the Steelers want a playmaker wide receiver, and I think they want George Pickens. But I think part of what's the problem with George Pickens is, like, for example, as we talked about on my Locked On Steelers show with the person who broke this news, George Pickens was like late to the Christmas Day game against the Chiefs, and like
not on game day. On game day, bro.
On
late
game day, like showed up after inactives were announced, and like that. And by the way, Tony, that was after he had missed the last 3 straight games due to injury. And it was in that game, at the end of the game, when the Steelers are losing and there's an offensive procedural penalty and everything's kind of down, you see George Pickens take off his helmet and start yelling at the sideline and yelling, just crashing out on the field. It's like, buddy, you don't get to be the person that's like, we got to get this together when you're late. And I think that's the problem, is that George Pickens has been that guy for so many times that Mike Tomlin has literally told him he's had to grow up and address him in public. And so the Steelers, they will, like, for example, the Steelers moved on from Deontay Johnson, and people thought, man, they're crazy for doing so. Now Deontay Johnson's been on 4 teams in the calendar month, and everyone's like, okay, that's why they did that. We understand that now. I think that George Pickens is put himself in a position where he needs to look. The Steelers found a way to get a second-round pick for Chase Claypool. They can move on and find a new guy. I don't think that Tyreek Hill is the answer. I think if the Steelers are going to do that, they're going to go and get. They're going to use that to get draft capital. Like for example, like I think if anything, like if I'm looking at the Dolphins, like say they just straight up cut Tyreek Hill, they trade him somewhere else. That's fine. You could still probably trade with the Steelers, but the Steelers are probably going to be like, hey, you know what? Cough up that second round pick. Or you know what? Let's swap first round picks. We'll move up 8 spots to the 13th spot. And then we'll also coop up like your third round pick, something like that for George Pickens. I could see something along those lines happen there. But I think the Steelers, if they're looking for anybody, in as far as the new wide receivers room, I think they're going to be signing a guy who isn't like that, and a guy that they can keep around longer than Tyreek Hill. I think I include the Steelers very much in the T. Higgins sweepstakes. If the Bengals let that man hit free agency, the Steelers, like we just talked about, the Steelers got $52.3 million in cap space. They'll have $72.3 million very quickly into free agency, because there's 2 guys I think they can cut to get there, and other guys they can restructure to get more than that. They can drop a bag on T. Higgins and be like, you know what? You're the new leader of the wide receiver room. We drafted Roman Wilson last year. He was hurt all season. We got Calvin Austin. Let's go draft another wide receiver this year, or sound like a Darius Slayton. And now, wham, all new wide receiver room with a star wide receiver that we know very well, because he's torched the Steelers for years with the Bengals. Now they've retooled things, and George Pickens is like, hey, you know what? You can enjoy that somewhere else. The Dolphins can pay him and work that. I think that's what's probably going to happen for the Steelers, because Mike Tomlin, he didn't deny the situation when questioned about it on Monday or Tuesday in his press conference. So I look at this, Tony, and I think the Steelers, I could see them very much likely moving on from George Pickens, because you don't want to pay a guy, long term, who's bringing these issues, especially when you're trying to find leadership on the offensive side of the ball. That's what the Steelers have been looking for the past several years, since the crew of Marquise Pouncey, David DeCastro, Ben Roethlisberger, Le'Veon Bell, Antonio Brown. Since that crew broke up, they haven't had a nucleus of leadership, and they're trying to find it in the young guys now. I think Pat Fryermuth's part of that puzzle. I think that maybe that they're hoping that Zach Frazier, Broderick Jones, and Troy Fautano in the offensive line can be part of that puzzle. But George Pickens has shown time and time again, he doesn't accept responsibility when he messes up. He dropped 3 passes against the Bengals and was just like, meh. When he was asked about running the wrong route against the Chiefs, he was like, who said that? And so I think that there needs to be, if George Pickens is going to be serious, the Steelers need to have a kind of sit down with him and be like, look, George, I know that you've been doing this, but you got to choose right now. Do you want to be here long term? You want to shut all that up? Or do you just want to keep doing the way you're doing? And if you do so, they will find a new team form, and the Steelers will probably move on from George Pickens. But Tyreek Hill, I also don't think is the answer, not when he's choosing not to go in games. And I get that the Dolphins are a disaster situation, but I think the Steelers need someone younger. I think they need someone better, and I think that that's what they're going to end up doing.
Listen to the squad shows as we move on. I'm going to get a quick opinion from Chris on a possible upset this week. The squad show talked about the Rams. And, of course, all the things that are going on in L.A. are not wiped out by a football game, but it does give you a little bit of a reprieve, and it was a feel-good story that they were able to win. See if they can do it this week against the Eagles. Check this out.
I don't know if they're going to be able to do it this time around, as much as I want to say that the Rams are going to be able to give everyone out in California a little bit of a lift. I just think that the Eagles have far too much talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, and on defense, definitely. You want to make sure that you're trying to contain that potent and very aggressive Eagles defense. To me, the matchup of the week in this is going to be whether or not the Rams defensive front can control the Eagles offensive line. If they can do that, this will be a tight one, and I think a very good game. If it doesn't, I like the Eagles probably in a comfortable one this weekend.
All right, we'll go quick here, Chris. You saw Philly straight up. Matthew Stafford has won. Sean McVay has won. They got a nice young defense. Can they beat and pull the upset and beat Philadelphia?
They could. I think Sean McVay is a good coach. I think Sean McVay and Mike Tomlin have a lot of similarities. I think that, Sean McVay, again, they got their team to 10-7. They just happen to be a division where 10-7 could win it, and you're not up against 2 MVP level quarterbacks every single time you line up 4 times a year. But I think that that's where they were able to beat a Vikings team that we all kind of looked at. Was like, are they really going to do the thing this year? They didn't. Now here's the thing: the Eagles are the epitome of what I think the NFL is heading towards, with a lot of teams that are like, hey, you know what? We don't got an MVP level quarterback. And that's not to diss Jalen Hurts, but let's just face it. He's not in the Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes category. I think he's in that tier right below those guys. So how do you make up for that? You get a kick butt offensive line. You get a kick butt defensive line. You invest well at skill positions on both sides of the ball, and you have one of the more complete rosters in the NFL. And that's what the Rams are up against this weekend. And you know what? I had the Eagles being a team that when I saw Jalen Hurts had a concussion going into the playoffs, like maybe that can count against them. Not the way they played last week. They're going to play the tough style of football that's going to make it really tough on the Rams. I think the Rams could pull off the upset. I just don't think that they will. I got the Eagles winning that one.
I would appreciate that. As always, Chris Carter joining us here on Thursday on Locked On NFL. Make sure you tap in the morning. You can get Tyler rolling, and he'll hit you with a double shot of espresso, and then slide back by the barbershop as Locked On NFL. It's twice a day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. For Chris Carter, for Tony Wiggins, make sure y'all have a good weekend. Keep warm. Watch out for the snow and enjoy the football game.